Welcome to the People Relations Podcast, the podcast series brought to you by People Relations HR Consulting, where we talk with business and HR leaders around the globe. In each episode, we will discuss exclusive insights, strategies, and advice to help you make better people decisions in your business. For show notes and incredible bonus resources, simply visit www.peoplerelations.com.au. Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the show. We are delighted to have you join us for another exciting episode. Today, I'm very thrilled to introduce our guest, Athena Chintis. Athena is not only the head of people and culture at Cliftons, that is a one-stop shop for all event management in Australia, but also holds the prestigious position of being the New South Wales State President and Awards Judge at ARI, the Australian Human Resources Institute. Athena's career has seen her in various HR leadership roles until the date at renowned organizations such as the National Rugby League, Kellogg Company, Citigroup, and much more. She has a wealth of experience and expertise in the field of human resources. Welcome, Athena, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Pam. I'm delighted to be here.
Can you share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your career?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. My career has been quite the journey. I've worked in a number of different industries and various sized organisations across international companies. I began my HR career within the finance sector, predominantly banking and then investment banking. So the first 15 years there, where I gained a lot of insights into not only how the sector works, but also the corporate world and what it's like to work in HR within large corporate organisations. From there, I transitioned into the property industry. I worked for an industry association for the property sector, and that was just after the GFC, or at the height of the GFC. So I had the opportunity to start a HR function from the ground up in a very difficult environment within the industry, and then grew that from there. After I left there, I worked for a few different organisations. I wanted to diversify my industry exposure, so I took that opportunity to contract in a number of roles, including the NRL, which anyone who knows me knows that I love sport, and I would have done that gig for free actually, because it was an absolute passion project.
That's so exciting.
But after a few years, then I moved to here. So currently I'm with an exciting event solutions organisation called Cliftons. We've rebranded to Cliftons Event Solutions, which we'll talk through a bit later. And I've had a lot of exposure it's certainly put my HR experience and skills to the test in being I've worked in fast-paced industries as well, particularly in banking, but event management and event planning, you can go through a roller coaster of busyness and slower times. But all in all, throughout these experiences, I've really honed my skills and adapted to the different needs of different industries.
Absolutely. That gives you different perspectives, so many learning experiences, and how important it is that exposure, generalist exposure to certain industries, how much it equips you and helps you to contribute and innovate in other industries. But very exciting businesses. Always based in Sydney, Athena?
Yes, I've always been based in Sydney. Yeah.
What does Clifton Solutions do? Who do you help?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually. So Cliftons is a privately owned organisation. We've been around for 25 years. I've been with the organisation for 4. And we have really changed over that time. Originally, at its heart, it's an events organisation. We have a number of diverse, flexible meeting space venues in capital cities across Australia, New Zealand, and we're in Asia as well, Hong Kong and Singapore. Our clients are corporate clients, and the events could range anything from big to small. So it could be a meeting room, a boardroom meeting, a training day, team building, like a multiple day conference, an exhibition. It could be really anything. And that's the beauty of working in this sort of organisation, because the services are tailored to what the client wants. As you can imagine, throughout COVID, the demand for in-person events has shifted somewhat. We have revamped the organisation and also do a lot of virtual events, which we had that capability before, but we are trying to grow that side of the business as well as exam solutions. So we have a number of clients, for example, the professional associations or royal colleges, where we do run exams in person or virtually. And we also can project manage the events. So an event can be located at our premises or somewhere else, or even at the client's own premises. But through our capability, we offer a number of event project management services.
That's amazing. And you sit on the New South Wales State Council for the Australian Human Resources Institute, as we were introducing
Yes.
before. That's a very important leadership role for the Human Resources Institute in Australia, which I'm a member myself, worked in a project as well, constantly project for them. And it's an honor to be part of ARI and to be talking to you, being the state president. Can you tell us how long you've been doing that? What took you to that role?
Yes, I used to work for the Property Council, and that gave me an insight into how a really well-run membership organisation operated. And at the Property Council, we had a lot of different elements to it, but they ran a lot of professional development programs, events, research, advocacy. And so although I was in HR, I got exposure to the business, and so I think you absorb quite a bit when you're working, closely with the business. And at the Property Council, we relied a lot on volunteers, and they were elected as well onto committees, state councils, and the like. A huge volunteer, and that was seen as being quite highly sought after. So I took that opportunity when my role is an elected role. I'm first and foremost a state councillor, and I've been a state councillor since 2015 and was the secretary on our state council. So our role is to represent our members in New South Wales, or the jurisdiction that you're from. New South Wales is just a nudge over Victoria at times. We've got the largest membership group in terms of numbers. And so I worked under a couple of presidents during that time. And at the very beginning of what was just as COVID hit, our former president stood down, and I thought I'd like to take that opportunity to step into that role. So I was elected by the council into that role. Both, it's quite parallel actually. Cliftons and ARI at the same time were heavily impacted by COVID during those first couple of years, particularly around running face-to-face events.
As well. So congratulations for your involvement with the HR community, being an HR leader yourself. How do you help the HR professionals in New South Wales?
Yeah, that's a really good question, isn't it? Because sometimes you feel like you're so remote. So there's a couple of different, or a few different ways. Obviously, we try and build local communities through the events we run. Primarily in the last few years, they've been virtual, but we also do in-person networking events. And we know from the work that ARI has done in terms of researching its own membership, that one of the reasons why people join ARI, one of the foremost reasons, is to belong to a community. So it's about trying to nurture that. And if you think about just in your own life, I don't know about you, but I'm a member of a number of different things. Sometimes I use them really well and get very involved in them, sporting sort of things, or ARI itself. And others, you might just be accessing the information, or you might subscribe to something and hardly use it at all. The more involved you become, the more value you derive from that, I think.
Absolutely.
That's an important thing to do. Another thing that I'm involved in as the state president, so we provide feedback to ARI about issues that are impacting the members. So, for example, during COVID, the CEO of ARI had reached out to say, how can we help? And this was at the height of the lockdowns in New South Wales and in Victoria. They were really particularly impacted. And she reached out to myself and the president in Victoria and said, what can we do? And I said, look, we need really ready access to resources. At that time, there was the argument about, or the debate within Australia about should we enforce vaccination or not. The government wasn't setting that sort of standard, making it mandatory. It was highly encouraged. And I said, we need to create that conversation. We need some more important. And within a couple of weeks, ARI had assembled a panel of different HR leaders, lawyers, and it was a great virtual event. And they got hundreds of people dialing into that, and it was really good.
Yeah, I remember there were a lot of webinars organized to provide support to the HR professionals in such challenging times, because obviously there were a lot of changes. It was unprecedented time, so we needed to be prepared to be constantly up to date.
That's right.
It's great because one of the reasons I became a member is to be part of the community, be up to date with the latest trends in HR in Australia, in the globe. We get a lot of quarterly reports, newsletters. I even get a magazine with like really good content and articles discussing current topics. It's great to be part of the community because we learn from each other, but also the great professional work that the Human Resources Institute in Australia does in terms of research and communicating with the network and gathering everyone together in person or webinars. So now, moving a bit into your experience, Athena, as a business leader, what are the biggest HR people management pain points? What did you do to address them? How did you ensure you provided positive change and help to have an impact in the bottom line of the organization at the time?
We talked about COVID. I think that's probably been the single most challenging times. I've faced a number of different, or been part of organisations when they've gone through difficult times in the past. I've had the GFC, we've had all of the dot-com boom and bust while at Citigroup, 9/11 events as well. But I think I'll go back to COVID being one of the most challenging, particularly because people didn't really know, there was no plan. And being a national and international sort of organisation, the jurisdiction in each state differed. So that really, you had to keep a watching eye. It wasn't just me or what have you. So you had, on the employment front, you had a number of different things that we had to navigate, and what government assistance would be applied, and what the ability was to stand down workers or navigate those changes. But even to operate the business, that really differed. So and we went through that period for 2 years where there was chopping and changing. You could run events with a certain type of events with social distancing or restricted numbers and COVID restrictions, and then others that we couldn't. But during that time, we were able to run a number of exams. I mentioned to you a number of our clients in that medical profession sphere, and they had to continue. So exemption was sought at the highest levels of the health departments in those jurisdictions to run those events. But that time, all in all, was quite a difficult one. We focused on employee retention as much as we could. So we utilised the government support. Obviously, we had job and the equivalent in New Zealand. We have a lot of casual staff being in events, but this was about preserving the jobs as best we could of the permanent employees. So through that, there was a lot of consultation with employees, constant updates, and trying to keep people engaged and feeling well supported as best we could during that time.
It's been definitely unprecedented times globally, and then the impact on each organization was at a different level. Especially at the beginning, it was all an unknown, so even the governments were trying to figure out how to go about it. But for all HR professionals, it was very challenging times, very exhausting times, because our main priority was looking after the people, the health of our people, but also trying to continue doing business in the best possible way. And Athena before was talking about job seeker, and where government plans to support business and employees with downtime as well from work, because some people couldn't work at all. There was no work for them.
That's right, exactly. And that's exactly what happens. And part of our business was able to work from home. Clearly that they could, if they're in sales roles or corporate office functions, you could work from home. Before that, we didn't really have a working from home culture or policy, so that had to be created on the fly, make sure that people were set up correctly, creating a lot of different resources to support people about how to stay engaged during that time and support their own health. And people were, generally worried as well. But for those people whose roles are based within the venue, their work really dried up unless they were able to support exams. Fortunately, we were able to try and help people. So, for example, if we were running exams, people, normally we would have casuals, exam invigilators, well, others stepped in, the permanent staff. So flexibility was quite important at that time, and people did what they could to keep the business going and keep themselves going.
Absolutely. Same as the hospitality industry, of course, many people were also highly impacted. Now moving to a very hot topic, that is how to motivate and engage employees. One of the top priorities of business, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think firstly, you need to understand what employee engagement is and what the signs of that are. Do your employees feel proud of where they work? Are they putting in effort? Last year there was constant talk about quiet quitting, wasn't there? But that's all about a discretionary effort, but people turning up and just going through the motions, or are they actually going above and beyond? I don't think quiet quitting is anything new. I think that's been around for years, really. It's just a different term. And the other thing would be is, do employees intend to stay with the organisation? So I think it's important to get some insights into what's impacting engagement in your organisation. No organisation or no two organisations are going to be exactly the same. So you really need to understand what is driving that, and what if you can, depending on the size of your organisation, of course, can you even analyse to see if there are differences between different employee locations or employee job functions or departments, teams, and the like. It's important to remember that really it's not one size fits all. So just because I think it's important to benchmark, don't get me wrong, I do, because you do get then a number, and when you're presenting that to leaders, they like to see how, I think it probably appeals to their competitiveness in many respects, how an organisation is tracking against others in the industry or others of a similar size. But in terms of solutions, you can look at what other companies are doing, but really it needs to be created for your organisation. And to do that, you could probably get some inspiration from within the general industry. But if you work closely with the leaders and get some feedback from staff themselves about what they would like to see, then that's going to be more impactful for your organisation. Yeah, absolutely. Tailor it to your organisation.
That's really good advice, Athena. And what is your advice when it comes to growing a successful team for those small businesses or medium-sized businesses that are growing?
I think, and this is the difficult thing. Sometimes it's a double-edged sword. When you're growing or when you're in a mid-sized organisation, the people who do, I think, are the ones who are adaptable, those who embrace learning opportunities, those who see that doing something outside their strict job description as strictly defined may be able to add value. You're not just stuck in a narrowly defined role and have to not traipse around. You can get or go outside that boundary, to say you can go outside your job role, put your hand up and get involved in projects across the company or different initiatives, or craft your job in a different way to focus on things that might be needed within the business. And I've seen that here and elsewhere. And that leads to really good intrinsic motivation, I think, if people can do some of the work that they enjoy doing, not forgetting their actual job duties, but going outside that to do work that's important for the business. So it's about tapping into those people who are going to thrive in that environment. It's not for everyone, I think. It's interesting because some people are motivated by having a defined career path, or that's what they're looking for, formal promotions and different career steps. And sometimes when you're working in those mid-sized organisations or small, you might get, as I said, opportunities that you potentially wouldn't if you were in starting your career in a large organisation. I'm not saying that every organisation is like this, mind you, it depends, but you can be more, you might have opportunities to go and work overseas and do all of that, but think about the opportunities that are being presented. Are you being, I guess, taken along to client meetings or have the opportunity to manage a project and work closely with more senior people? So yeah,
Absolutely.
I think to look for that adaptability, people who are going to have and embrace a desire to continue learning and appreciate that learning doesn't always happen in a formal way. I'm not dismissing formal learning, of course, but just appreciating that learning through others and learning on the job is critical, actually putting things into practice and building your skills and experience that way. But all in all, to manage a team, for a business leader, it's going to be also, you still need to make sure that people are aligned to the goals that you set, that you have constant or ongoing feedback, that you're
Absolutely.
coaching them, you're giving them feedback that is helpful for them to grow, as well as feedback that might be positive, but you're also giving them developmental or constructive feedback.
Absolutely.
But also, regardless of your team size, the principles still apply for you as a leader in leading your team, in that they need to understand what your team is set up for. You know, what's the purpose of your team? How does it contribute to the organisation? So they need to have a shared understanding of what they're working towards and how that their role contributes to the overall success of the team or the organisation. It's important for you to do regular catch-ups with the team individually as well, through one-on-ones, give people continuous coaching and feedback, both positive and developmental feedback. And also try and foster, I know we're using this word quite a bit at the moment, or in the last few years, focus on creating an environment, like a psychologically safe environment, where people feel like they can express things openly and that it's a safe place to do. I've worked in environments before and where it's not necessarily safe to fail. I think organisations are moving beyond that, though. This is probably a legacy of the time rather than anything else. But if the company embraces innovation, that the teams feel and the leaders feel like it's okay to try something new and learn from that experience. And if you have perfectionist tendencies like I sometimes do, you think, oh God, I've got to get it right. I've got to get it 100% right. And you're with a supportive leader who says, no, don't worry about it. Just get it out and you can finesse it later, because you're worried about getting something wrong. Then it's great to work in an environment or for a leader that recognizes, look, it's okay. That's all right. Let's trial it. Let's test it. Or think about in the beginning what could likely go wrong and see what you can do to avert that.
That's a very good point. You are giving advice of any team leader, any people manager, supervisor that is managing a team, whatever the size, is to ensure that you give opportunities for them to grow, to prepare for what we call in HR succession planning. But on the other hand, is also making sure that they understand the purpose of their role and how they can contribute to the organization individually, but also as a team. So that's great. But that's not all, right? Athena mentioned a very important term that is psychological safety. Not only has a significant impact on the success of our organization, but it's also very important for employee well-being. And in practical terms, for our listeners, providing an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, their ideas, without the fear of judgment, negative consequences. So it's a place where we are all safe and we contribute and collaborate to have a positive impact and in the end achieving our business success. It's very important that you as a business owner, HR leader or people manager, you contribute and create that environment, and there are practical ways to do that.
That's right. That's right. I think we've got to recognise that the environment that you create within the organisation, you could have all the shiny new benefits and the policies and things like that, but at the end of the day, unless you've got the culture that embraces it, or the leaders that embrace that and make sure that they are driving that within their teams, then it's hard to achieve
It's
success.
not an isolated, yes. Athena, can you share effective HR strategies that our listeners can take away that will have an impact on their company growth or bottom line?
Certainly. At the end of 2021, when the business that I work in, Cliftons, needed to ramp back up after the COVID lockdowns finished, and we needed to rebuild after lean times, we were entering, it was a challenging time in terms of the labour market. It was the tightest labour market in Australia and New Zealand. We've seen unprecedented record low unemployment, and we had to backfill roles that we hadn't hired. We'd re-emerged from a hiring freeze, and we needed to grow in new roles, but also replace roles that had gone during the previous 2 years. So we embarked on a project to revamp our employee value proposition. And to do that, we actually surveyed our staff and got insights into what they were looking for, not from us as an employer, but any employer. And we used that information. I tapped into a lot of benchmarking data, whatever I could at the time, about what the job market was looking for, what candidates in the job market were looking for. And for our staff, flexibility was quite important, and work-life balance, interestingly, they were in the top 3. There was some variation across different job functions, but overall they were the top 3. So we embarked on a project to revamp our EVP, but also our benefits as well. And we created a number of benefits to support lifestyle. So I think that really helped as well in terms of our recruitment campaigning and trying to attract candidates. And that's important, to know what you're good at and what you can deliver. And you might not be good at everything, and that's okay. It's no point saying we pay at the top of the market when you don't pay at the top of the market, because there will always be another role that people can apply to, or say, I've got money. But is money the biggest motivator? Look, for some roles it probably is, and others it probably is. So being sure about what you are good at and what you can provide, and then using those opportunities in different ways to educate potential candidates through the process and your employees. So doing all of that work, we also created some videos, some social blogs, we revamped all of our assets, and through that we've seen a lot more interaction with our employment brand. In some roles, it's important. We've seen more applications as well. So it's been quite good in that regard. And ultimately, we were successful. We were recognised earlier this year as one of the best places to work in the AFR BOSS.
Congratulations. I was going to ask about that. Well done.
Yeah, so we do use it as an opportunity to promote that. We have that on our ads. We do that in our interactions with candidates. I know through people that I've interviewed, but it is an important talking point for them when they do some research on the company and they've noticed that. So I think it makes people feel proud that they have applied to or are considering working at a place that is recognised as a best place to work in that way. Another successful initiative that we implemented back at the Property Council, again, it was through feedback from staff. Each year we had a staff summit where everybody came together from across the country, and that was a professional development exercise, a 2-day event. And we also would always seek staff input into our engagement survey, which would be run just prior. And a lot of innovation and different ideas would come through that. And I remember one particular one where people were saying, we would like more professional development. So off the back of that, we actually implemented a benchmark similar to what, say, if you belong to a professional association has, that you have to do a certain number of CPD hours every year. We implemented a benchmark of 40 hours of professional development. Some people really embraced that and some people didn't, because then they thought, oh, how am I going to have time off the job and all of that sort of thing. So off the back of that, we actually rolled out a huge campaign to get people to think very differently about what professional development looked like and how they could get that, not only by going to the Property Council events, but doing mentoring. We had a mentoring program, or being coached, or presenting, or doing things in their job. So we followed that. Your listeners may know of that 70-20-10 model of learning. So 70% of your learning happens on the job, 20% learning through others. And that became an attachment to the performance review template, which was another thing that we actually tailored based on feedback from staff. The first part of it was like a personalised engagement plan for staff. So it encouraged people to have conversations with their manager about what was ticking them off, or how could things be improved, how could they work better with their manager. So it just opened up the conversation. And then in the middle part was the classic performance reviews, goals, and also the assessment against the values, and then that development plan. It doesn't have to be hugely sophisticated, but as long as it opens up the conversation, and that was the thing that we would always try and reinforce. It's about having the conversation with your manager, and it is very much a two-way street. It shouldn't be the organisation or the manager setting things for you, and you've also got to drive that process as well. And think about where you want your exactly. It's a measurement.
There's a measurement because having to achieve up to certain hours, having some time to think about your career and your skills and
what you want to do, where you want to go. It could have been formal learning or formal study, and some people were doing that's for sure. And we ran a number of webinars and centrally organised programs, but it could have also been, as I said, things that were on the job.
That's a very progressive initiative, actually, and easier to measure and track, and actually driven by the feedback that your staff have given.
Yeah, that's right.
How did that
exactly.
impact in the business overall?
Yeah, that was good because, and I remember feedback at the time from a particular policy advisor saying, for the first time in my life, I'm having a conversation about that it's about me. I feel like it was the nicest process that she had experienced. But I mean, I don't know whether it's nice or not nice, but yeah, I think the more focus that you have on the individual and that they can have a place in driving that outcome as well.
Before, you were saying that one of the top 3 priorities for employees overall was work and life balance and career opportunities and growth development. So it's interesting how this initiative, it was tackling that, right? Like people.
Yeah, because when you're in an organisation that is not located in the one place and you've got small teams, different parts of Australia, then it's hard for people to see where they can progress to. And now, since COVID, that's opened up more flexibility about where people can work. But historically, that's been a challenge, I think, for geographically distributed organisations. But I remember at that time, there were a number of people who would do different secondments and it's about trying to publish what opportunities are available or those success stories as well. We would try and tap into those who had taken up opportunities to educate others. When I was at the NRL, I wasn't the HR leader. I was brought in as just a contractor to help that team, the HR team. On a few projects, they had done an engagement survey and they identified a couple of things that they wanted to roll out, one of them being a wellbeing strategy for the corporate organisations. We're not talking about the rugby league players here, we're talking about the people who work for the NRL. So they'd come up with the concept already and I was there to as one of the projects to help drive that. So there were a few things that I had worked on at the time, and one of them was rolling out a new volunteer policy, and that was for people who work there to actually volunteer. There were 2 days of volunteering that were given. One that could be for anything, for your own child's event or something that was important to you, and one that was associated with the rugby league itself through game development days, or I tried to set up relationships, and the NRL has a lot of partners that deal in that non-for-profit space, so identifying what sort of opportunities might be available to volunteer through those organisations. And that also fit into an overall wellbeing strategy that the NRL wanted to, or the HR leader at the time wanted to implement across the board. And so I did a lot of different research and put together the strategy and the options as well, because being in such a high-profile organisation, but it was also about wellbeing itself, and they do a lot for the players, and they have a lot of initiatives. They've got teams that actually, have strategies to support mental health, and we actually looked at what does wellbeing mean, and this is how it's defined, and then these are the opportunities and initiatives that they could pursue, either internally by leveraging the experience of other parts of the business. As I said, there were teams, there would still be teams within the NRL who do some really great work within the rugby league community. So tapping into that experience for their own staff base, but also some initiatives around like physical, financial and social wellbeing. So the social wellbeing was the volunteering aspect. And they're not a huge organisation in terms of staff numbers, but when you've got an organisation that is geographically dispersed, that's always a challenge, isn't it? You want to roll out something that is going to offer something to everyone, regardless of where they work within the business.
All right.
Yeah.
You brought really good examples, very good tips and strategies that are practical to implement and that will have an impact. That's very good. And our last question, what do you think the future of work looks like? What listeners to prepare for it, for what's coming next?
Yeah, AI obviously is a big thing, and how organisations embrace and tap into using AI. When you think about it practically, people use Google or they use different things to leverage. There's always productivity and efficiency gains. So why should we be scared of using AI? But I'm not an expert in AI. So you asked me what the future of work holds. I think it certainly is very dynamic. We're still grappling with the debate about whether people or where people should work, and how the remote work opportunities has certainly assisted organisations, and there are some that are remote first and doesn't matter. But where does that lead to? Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. We certainly support a hybrid work environment. We're talking about organisations that are remote first and never come together, or hardly come together. So that's a debate that we're seeing now, where some organisations are saying, look, starting to dictate or mandate a certain number of days within the office, and the people are still looking for flexibility, and they're up in arms around that. So that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds, and if the economy turns or unemployment turns, I wonder where that's going to go. We're also seeing a greater emphasis on employee wellbeing, not just after COVID. I think certainly in Australia, we've got the code within Safe Work Australia and across a number of states here around managing psychosocial risks. So there is now an obligation on employers to proactively identify what those risk factors are and do something about it, like you would any other health and safety risk. But that probably follows a lot of conversation and research that has occurred around the importance of employee well-being and to productivity and to engagement and the like. For example, management style or the job demands, or it depends on the industry, of course, because the important is to consult with your employees and find out what are those risk factors. You're probably able to determine based on data. So it could be that workload's high, people are working long hours, or if you're working in an environment where there is like people customers being challenging or difficult. So you're going to be seeing that, but you can also ask your employees.
So this refers to various elements, as you're saying now. On one hand, you were talking about the job demands, then the role ambiguity, or the organizational culture as well, which is very important.
Yeah, that's right.
Career development, as we were talking about before, job security.
I think that a lot of organisations anyway trying to focus on well-being for their employees, and they recognise that there's a link between employee well-being and productivity or the success within the organisation.
Athena, it's been very interesting. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. And yes, looking forward to chatting with you soon.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the People Relations Podcast. We hope that today's discussion helps you find new ways to make better people decisions within your business. For additional insights and resources, remember to visit our website at peoplerelations.com.au. If you found value in this episode, please like and share the show with your friends who are dedicated to running and growing their businesses. We can't wait to have you back next time for more great conversations. Until then, take care and see you soon.